Hi, you've tuned into the AK Compass, your guide through the evolving landscape of travel and sustainability. I'm Karolina Czako, here with journalist Agnes Gárdonyi. Together, we dive into global topics connecting discovery, responsible travel, and sustainability with a special focus on real stories from people who experienced life across cultures.
Every episode, we feature guests, from passionate travelers to sector specialists, who share first-hand insights and diverse perspectives, all without the filter of politics.
A big thank you goes out to the Sweet Home Studio for making this podcast possible. Their mission is to bring important social topics to Hungarian audiences. They also give new podcasters a special prize to support more valuable content. They are based in Budapest, offering full technological support and a great space to make podcasts. András, it's nice to see you again. Today we're going to interview András Huszár, who is the founder and CEO of the Green Policy Center in Hungary. And he actually you have a lot of experience with the ministries, with government, and with policy making. So back then when you founded this company, I was very excited to hear about it. And now, a few years onwards, we're here to discuss where you are now and learn more about you. So please, can you start by telling us a bit about yourself and your professional background, and how did you come across sustainability at first?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I guess it's a long story, but I try to be short for the sake of time. So I'm a lawyer by profession, and I first met with the topic at the university when we had to write about a topic like a submission. And I was already interested in criminal law at the university, but I was also started to become interested in environmental issues. And that's why I started to do some research in environmental crime, because it's a very interesting mix of these two areas. Actually, I was inspired by three people, I would say. One was my lecturer. His name is János Zlinszky. He's a very well-known figure in the Hungarian sustainability area. I attended one of his classes, and it was quite insightful for me and eye-opening to the world. I also saw the movie by Al Gore, the former vice president of the United States, the movie called Inconvenient Truth, which had a fundamental influence on my views and how I saw the world. And last but not least, my then girlfriend was also into this area, and she also inspired me, helped me, and we tried to discover this topic together at that time. So these were the three main sources of my interest in sustainability or environmental related issues.
And what is the main focus of Green Policy Center?
Wow, it's a big step from the beginnings. So the Green Policy Center was founded in 2020 after I left the ministry, because I used to be the head of department at the climate policy department at the Ministry for Innovation and Technology at that time. It was called like that. And with my two colleagues who we co-founded the institution, we kind of felt like there was a need for a dedicated think tank, non-partisan think tank in the Hungarian sphere, specifically on climate issues, because, we had, of course, general environmental related NGOs in Hungary from the 1990s, basically. But we felt that there was a space and a need for a dedicated climate related think tank. And basically, our main focus is to facilitate and to contribute to the climate neutral transition of the Hungarian economy and society. So this is our focus. And of course, it involves a lot of different activities that we are undertaking to help to facilitate this transition. But this is the focus. So the climate neutrality goal of Hungary, which is in law, actually. It was adopted in 2020, actually, in summer, by the parliament. So the country has this very ambitious goal, I would say. And of course, it requires a lot of different activities that we are trying to facilitate or contribute to.
So your inspiration came from your education. I also worked with János Zlinszky And he's an amazing professor and an amazing expert in this field. And you also saw basically a niche, it seems like, to create policies that make sense, that could be more efficiently implemented based on your experience. Please tell us more about how you found this company, what were your possible challenges, or where did you feel lucky? Did you start at the right time? Because 2020 was obviously a very notable year.
Yeah, so we have to go back to the end of 2019 when I left the ministry, or I quit. Actually, I officially left at the end of January. But since January, I felt that we are going to do something like that. So we are going to create an institution. But of course, we, with my two colleagues, namely Tibor Schaffhauser and Máté Olti, we used to be colleagues at the ministry, and they already left the ministry when I left. So they were already outside. So we both felt that we want to work together in this sphere and we want to create an institution. But of course, we were lacking the experience because we always used to work in the public sphere. So we were not entrepreneurs. We didn't have any experience how to run a company, basically. We also had some financial difficulties, of course, because already the registration of the company requires a certain amount of money. But at the same time, if you want to make a living out of this, you have to have some financial resources right from the beginning, right? So there was no time for building up. So of course, we had some connections in this sphere. And fortunately, we found a donor foundation at that time. So we could apply immediately after we founded the company for some financial resources, and we were successful in that. So we had some resources to build up the company, but we were also lacking the logistics because, you know, we didn't have any office, or one of us, Tibor, who is still my colleague at the Green Policy Center, he was already living in Vienna. So, you know, kind of remote cooperation, it's also very challenging, not only from a professional side, but also from the personal side. Like we don't really meet that often, mainly online. So it was also a challenge. But slowly but surely, we were able to build up and to create some solid grounds for our operations. So I would say these were the main challenges at the foundation.
Yes, good work takes time. There are no shortcuts.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about some examples, what you achieved, something you're proud of, maybe?
So when I got this question, I always say that the biggest achievement is that we are still here because, you know, we celebrated our 5th anniversary in this year. So we are very proud that we are still in this fair, because it's not that easy as it sounds, right? I mean, you always have to find some new challenges, new opportunities, new resources that can keep you alive, basically. And, you know, Hungary is not the not the easiest territory for environmental NGOs, I would say. So that's one of the biggest achievements. But of course, we are also proud of that we have become, I think, a renowned actor in the Hungarian sustainability area. So I think most of the actors we have some connections with, and they value our work, and we can make cooperations quite easily, I would say. We are also still non-partisan and quite independent, I would say. So that's also a big achievement, that we don't have to follow certain agendas, or, you know, we don't have to obey to some interest groups or anything like that, which is a huge achievement, I would say, especially in Hungary, or yeah. And we have also created some flagship products, what we call flagship products or projects. One of them is the Climate Neutrality Hungary Conference. It's a yearly conference on the occasion of the adoption of the Hungarian climate law on the 3rd of June each year. So we are organizing this conference to make the decision makers remember that Hungary has this quite ambitious goal, and we have to do something about it to achieve it, actually. But we have also compiled and present each year the Climate Neutrality Progress Report of Hungary, because I truly believe that adopting climate policies is one thing, but implement them is another thing. And my experience is that implementation is always a bigger challenge than adoption, because in everyday life, certain policies require continuous determination from decision makers and all the stakeholders and actors. And we are trying to follow how these policies are being implemented in Hungary and what are the qualitative achievements. So how much reduction have we achieved? And we want to look beyond the total numbers. So Hungary, of course, has a certain amount of greenhouse gas emission reduction, but it's a result of various different activities. And we want to examine these activities, like what is happening beyond the total amount reduction number. And maybe last but not least, I would also like to mention our project related to security and climate, because unfortunately, as we experience the increasement of the climate impacts, these impacts or challenges or effects can have a security implication. And we want to focus on how to prevent these situations in Hungary. So how Hungary can be more resilient to these impacts. So maybe these are one of the most or the biggest achievements which we are really proud of. But of course, we have many different achievements as well. Yeah.
And you've explained a lot of projects and events that you're doing, so you're very active and with different tasks and activities and events. In your opinion, which one of your projects or events has the biggest impact, either measurable or just by experience, because not everything is immediately measurable?
Yeah. I also wanted to start with this, like in our case and in the case of think tanks, measuring impact is very difficult because I think in most countries, governments or decision makers don't implement your recommendations 100%, right? So I don't really see an example when a recommendation have been implemented 100%. And of course, even if it's adopted or taken into account, you never know it was because of you or because of some other influences as well. So it's really difficult to measure the impacts, but I would highlight two cases maybe. So we were involved in the civil consultation process of the Hungarian National Energy and Climate Plan, which is a mandatory requirement from the EU to create such a plan in each EU member state. And basically, this is a plan how the country or the member state will contribute to the common EU effort in reducing greenhouse gases and in advancing the climate neutrality transition. So it's a very serious work, I would say. And we were able to provide recommendations to this National Energy and Climate Plan. Of course, not all of them have been taken into account, but we saw some areas where it was, had an impact maybe on the final text of the NECP. I cannot really prove it, but as we see our recommendations and the final text, maybe there are some correlations. And the other one, it's quite recent. It was, I think, last year in September, where we started a project to increase the influence of the Hungarian climate science community for decision making. And we wanted to we actually facilitated a declaration by the Hungarian climate scientific community. It's called the 10 Messages of the Hungarian Climate Science for a Livable Future. It's a declaration. It has 10 points, and it's kind of a common minimum message from the science community what to do with the climate challenge. And we are really proud that it had an impact because a lot of newspapers had articles on that. And I think it's kind of a common basis where we can all agree upon, and we can formulate our messages based on these 10 points messages.
I think that you should be very proud of actually influencing policies at all. As you know, with the UN level policies, national EU level policies, it's always a compromise. For me, as an expert in the environmental field, it's a huge achievement that you got to influence it at all. And even if you made a tiny difference, that can have a huge impact in the future.
Let me go back to the climate neutrality report you publish every year. Without going into politics, how is Hungary doing on this area?
Climate related progress is always tricky because it depends what you compare with what. You cannot really say in itself Hungary is doing good or not. You can always compare it to other countries maybe, or I don't know, some different indicators or measurements. In general, I would say Hungary is doing not that bad, to say the least, because of course the total emission reduction compared to 1990s is quite remarkable, I would say. But as we all know, it's partly or main part of that effort or achievement is due to the economic transition of the country in the beginning of the 1990s, where the heavy pollution industry collapsed, basically. But since then, we have also achieved some remarkable emission reduction. But the biggest problem, what we see is that there is no conscious climate policy driven emission reduction. So the emission reduction is largely following the economic processes. So when the economy is performing better, the emissions are not that much decreasing. When the economy is doing worse, the emissions are also, there's a emission reduction in Hungary. So we don't really see a conscious climate policy driven emission pathway of Hungary, but this is what we need because on average, we need at least 3 to 5% emission reduction each year from this year to 2050 if we are serious about climate neutrality. And in the last couple of years, interestingly, the emissions decreased significantly. But we have examined this, and basically these were largely a result of one-off policies, so which cannot be in place for several years, but only had implications one time on the emissions. Either that or economic problems caused these kind of emission reductions. So basically, we have to be serious about the climate policy driven emission reduction. And that is why actually we are now involved in the creation or formulation of an alternative climate law, new climate law proposal in Hungary, because recently the Constitutional Court of Hungary decided that the current climate law of Hungary is not enough, basically, not ambitious and not comprehensive enough. And we, together with many different organizations, are in the process of creating and formulating a textual proposal for a new climate law in Hungary. And we do hope that it will be adopted, or something similarly comprehensive and serious will be adopted. And then we can be more serious about emission reductions, and we have to be consistent. So we cannot rely on economic performance or, I don't know, one-off events or influences from the outside world, but we have to be conscious and we have to be determined in Hungary to reduce our emissions, because it's not only for the global interest, it's also in our interest, I would say. And we also have to focus not only on mitigation, but also adaptation and resilience, because unlike mitigation, adaptation and resilience only matters for us as Hungarians, because nobody else will adapt instead of us to the climate impacts, right? So we also have to focus for these areas. And if you do adaptation right, and if you do mitigation right, it can have co-benefits in each other's areas. So good adaptation policy can have mitigation impacts, and the good mitigation policy can have adaptation impacts, positive impacts as well. So we really have to think about in complex terms in this.
Thanks for explaining it. I think now it's a lot clearer for everyone what you're doing and what the problems are and also what the achievements are. You already mentioned some ways that the Green Policy Center is unique, but is there anything else you would like to highlight which makes the Green Policy Center unique?
I would add to this question, can you tell us about the people who are working at the moment in the organization?
Which also makes your organization unique.
Well, it's always interesting when I have to say why we are unique. It's always better to hear from others why they think we are unique. In the beginning, we thought that what makes us unique was the fact that we have some background in the public sphere. So we believed, or we try to believe, that we kind of understand the logic of the public decision-making processes. so we can make more relevant proposals from outside back to the public sphere. So this is what we thought why we were unique. But of course, maybe other organizations have similar backgrounds. I was not that aware of the others. But what makes us unique, I think, is the strong focus in this climate neutrality transition. And we deal with many different policy areas at the same time. And we are trying to understand and make it more clear to the general public and also for the professionals about the connections between different policy areas. Because what I saw is that the other NGOs or other actors in this sphere rather focus on one specific sector or one specific area of this transition. But as we all know, this is a very complex and very comprehensive effort, or it should be. And we have to see the connections between the different spheres and different topics. So we are rather generalist, I would say, which sometimes gives you the feeling that you are not an expert in any of the sectors. But at the same time, I think it's kind of a valuable knowledge when you see the whole picture and you can make proposals in sectors, taking into account other sectors' interests or other sectors' logic as well. So maybe this is that. And about my colleagues, so we are 3 in the company right now. I still work together with Tibor Schaffhauser, who I mentioned before. He's also the co-founder of the Green Policy Center. Mate, the 3rd co-founder, has left us, unfortunately. He found other challenges. And now we have Levente Kocó, who also used to work for the government before. He's one of the biggest experts, I would say, in EU ETS sector. So he's a very well-known expert in that sphere. And he joined us 3.5 years ago. So we are 3. And time to time, we are also working with trainees, basically, or young people. We give them opportunity to collaborate with us. But we also have an expert network. So we work together with many different experts from time to time in specific projects. If we need outside expertise, which we don't have in the company, we work with external experts together. So this is how we operate, basically.
What are your plans for the next few years?
And where can you be reached if somebody wants to reach out to the Green Policy Center?
Actually, our first kind of approach is that we don't want to grow as an institution. So our goal is not to be bigger and bigger all the time. So we want to keep our focus on the climate neutrality transition. We want to make our collaboration more effective among us to create even better products, but we don't want to hire more and more colleagues. So this is not our goal. We want to stay a well-known actor in the field. It's not easy because you always have to provide products which are relevant, which are well-known, which you can defend in the professional sphere. So this is always a challenge. And we want to continue to facilitate the transition to a climate neutral economy. This is the focus. And maybe I would highlight one interesting aspect we want to grow in is the cooperation between science and policy making. So this is one of our most important goals, I would say, because I truly believe in that. And I'm coming from a background with a PhD research, and I was also the IPCC focal point of Hungary. So I kind of witnessed how it works at the international sphere, how closely science and policymaking can work together. And I think this is something that we are still lacking in Hungary, this stronger cooperation between these two spheres, because I think it can be mutually beneficial for both spheres. So this is what we are trying to work on in the next period.
And so how can you be reached?
Yes, we can be reached mainly through our website, which is the greenpolicycenter.com. So anyone who wants to reach us, just type in our website, and there he or she will find the contact details.
András, thank you so much for being with us today and for informing our listeners about the work that you do. I really wish you the best moving forward, and I will personally be monitoring your progress and attend your events. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
That was it for today's episode. You've been listening to the AK Compass, guiding listeners to revolving ideas and directions. I'm Karolina Czako.
And I'm Agnes Gárdonyi. Subscribe, rate, and review if you'd like to support us. Thank you for listening.